Good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to today's webinar, Impairing Hazards. Chesapeake Region Safety Council welcomes you to our latest and greatest webinar, Impairing Hazards. I'm so glad you guys could make it here today. This presentation is being recorded, so if you want to replay it later, you can find this presentation on our website at chesapeakesc.org, and then look for resources, webinars. You'll be able to check out the video via YouTube, and you can also download this presentation, and that'll be ready just in a couple of days. Today, our esteemed presenter, who will be on here in just a couple of moments, is Chesapeake Region Safety Council's president, Dave Medeiros. Dave is joined here today by Debbie Jennings, who will answer some important questions probably towards the end. And Debbie is our Director of Highway Safety and Special Projects, and a wonderful resource for us here in relation to all things impairment, especially related to driving hazards and in the workplace. Christy Bliss will be on here as well. She will be womaning our Q&A today. Christy Bliss is the director of the Chesapeake Region Safety Council, Mid-Atlantic OTI Education Center. And so if you have questions throughout the presentation, I encourage you to put them in that Q&A or the chat feature. So you're on Zoom, if you're on a laptop or desktop, towards the bottom, there's a dashboard. You should see that little Q&A button with a question mark. Feel free to type in questions. We'll probably get to them at the end, but some folks, Christy may be answering them live as necessary, and you're welcome to chat. Use the chat feature as well. And if we don't get to your question today, then we will we'll send you an email. We'll do some follow-up, and then we can get back to you as soon as possible. We also want to encourage you all to check out the classes coming up in relation to impairment. We will be offering reasonable suspicion for supervisors trainer course, impairment education, and our cannabis workshops. And in addition, we'll also be offering naloxone trainer through the University of Maryland, Baltimore coming up soon. And we'll talk about that a little bit toward the end of the presentation. And before Dave gets started here, Debbie, would you like to say good morning for us? All right, well, we'll give Debbie a break then. That's okay, Debbie. We'll come back to you towards the end of the presentation. So I am gonna put a poll up here, and if you all wouldn't mind just taking a minute to answer the question, which is, does your organization have a written policy in place regarding arriving and remaining sober and ready to work through their work shift? So the answers are rolling in. Oh, I'm actually really happy to see that the yeses are coming in a little higher than the nos. That's fantastic. And Dave and Debbie will cover some more information that can give you some resources to make up those times as well. All right, yeah. Okay, yeses are winning, 82% to 18%. That's good stuff. Great, you can keep those coming in. All right, and I would love if somebody could try out that Q&A. I just want to make sure everything is functioning here this morning and ready for our presenter. Let's see. Go ahead and type me in a question. And in the meantime, I will share with you our whole worker health certificate program information in the chat, as well as our training schedule. And that's coming up here in just a moment.
Yep, chat's working and the question and answer is working.
Okay, no football talk in the Q&A. They're just kidding. Thank you guys. I appreciate you double checking that it's working. Great, folks, here is your latest and greatest training schedule. Go ahead and open that up, save that to your favorites so that you can see what courses are coming up. And I'd also like to share, which we'll review a little bit later, the Whole Worker Health Certificate Program link. Here it comes. All right. That's our Whole Worker Health Certificate Program. And as you look through and scroll through that presentation, you'll see that we do have a couple upcoming courses related to the Whole Worker Health Program. Actually, February, we have the Reasonable Suspicion for Supervisors Trainer course. That's February 25th here at our Baltimore location. And then we'll also offer the day before, actually, it's a Monday, Tuesday, the Impairment Education and Cannabis Use Workshop, which is free training. So make sure you check that out on the schedule there. So that's February 24th. So you can mark your calendars for the 24th and 25th for both impairment education, cannabis workshop, which would lead in perfectly to the reasonable suspicion for supervisors trainer course, which Dave will probably mention, covers the DOT requirement for training. And then on the 25th as well, I mentioned we'll have the University of Maryland, Baltimore stop in for the naloxone trainer course, which we're really proud to be offering through the University of Maryland, Baltimore. It's a great program with really amazing resources. And that's a free class. So we really want you to take advantage of that as well. Those are both offered at our Baltimore location. Debbie, while we're still waiting for Dave, do you want to check out these poll numbers?
Yes, I'd love to see them.
Let's see. I think if I can share the results here, you might be able to see them here, but we're coming in at 82%. Yes, they have an organization's written policy in place regarding arriving and remaining sober and ready to work through their work shift. And a couple of no's. 18% of the folks here today have no's, and I hope we're here to help them with getting that to a yes, right?
Definitely, and we actually have resources for anybody in either situation. And we'll get to that later when we discuss technologies and some of the training that's coming up. So I think we'll be able to help quite a few people on the webinar today.
That's great. That's great, Dave. And if you're ready to start presenting, we see your presentation and we're ready for you to roll.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I really love to get people up and get them doing a stretch and flex when we get started in the mornings. So since we're just going through the webinar, maybe we could roll our head around a little bit, roll it one way, roll it the other, work your fingers a little bit, kind of shake it out some. You know what? We could probably do a little twist and a turn and things like that. Lift your legs up and down, work your feet back and forth, just to get the blood pumping, because sometimes when we sit too long, we just kind of want to go to sleep and get a little stagnant. I don't want that to happen today because we've got a great presentation for you. My name is Dave Medeiros. I'm with the Chesapeake Region Safety Council, and our mission is to educate and influence people to prevent accidental injury and death. And I know safety people tend to have a problem with that term accident, because it conjures up in our minds that it was a chance set of circumstances that happened and we didn't have any control over it, and boom, we always like to use that term freak accident. It was a freak accident. I just didn't see that one coming. And so whenever I think about that a little bit, it's like, well, is it really a freak accident? Did I not know anything about it? Well, let me share some numbers with you. The leading cause of death in the United States is heart attack. The second leading cause of death in the United States is cancer. And the third one is what we like to term as preventable injury-related deaths. So, what we're familiar with, most people call it accidental death, accidental injuries and accidental death. The National Safety Council produces something called injury facts. and injury facts talk about this number 3 killer of people in the United States, these preventable injury deaths or accidental injury deaths. And the most recent data that they have is from 2022. And in 2022, there were 227,039 unintentional injury deaths in the United States. Okay, and when you look at it, you think, well, the population in the United States is about somewhere around 330 million people. You know, you think, well, that's that's not so bad. You know, is that an acceptable level of risk that we face? You know, I mean, yeah, people are going to have things go wrong. Well, then you look at the next piece of data there, which says preventable medically consulted injuries, 63 million. Now, all of a sudden, that number starts to have a different impact. 330 million people in the United States, 63 million of them have to seek medical attention as a result of an injury that they suffered. And you're like, wow, now we're starting to creep up to almost like 20% of the population in the United States injures themselves and has to go seek some sort of medical attention as a result of it. So, well, it was a freak accident. Well, hold on a second. Take a look at this. In injury facts, they break it down and categorize these causes of unintentional injury death. The leading cause of unintentional injury death in the United States is overdose or poisoning. 99,592 people in 2022 died as a result of overdose or poisoning. Motor vehicle crashes come up to the 46,000 number. Falls from 45,700, choking, drowning, fire, flame, smoke, mechanical suffocation, and then other. Those categories, well, you know, there's not enough of them to have a category of their own, so they get into that other category. Well, now all of a sudden, when we say it was a chance set of circumstances over which we had no control, now all of a sudden we start looking, there's some data out there to help us identify the areas where these problems occur. I always like to use a kind of a systematic approach to safety. And first of all, safety is the control or elimination of recognized hazards to attain an acceptable level of risk. When I use that term, I'm like, okay, so let's see, what's the systematic approach we can use to address it? It's know your game, master the fundamentals, and play it as a team. When we start to think about fundamentals, safety, the control or elimination of recognized hazards to attain an acceptable level of risk. Well, what's the systematic approach to that? It's this right here. Whoops. The systematic approach that we're all familiar with if we're safety people is we go around, we recognize hazards, we understand hazards, and we control them. Okay, and that is the basic systematic approach to preventing accidental injury in the workplace. That's people have been using it for years, and we see something, we look at it, and we go, oh, okay, what is it? Hazards are the potential for harm or damage to people, property, or the environment. Hazards include the interactions and characteristics of people and things. And the old safety cliche of safety cliches is they're unsafe conditions and unsafe actions. We start to look and we kind of train ourselves up to understand that. And that's our approach to addressing danger in the workplace. We want to be able to address it. That's what hazards are. Really, they're dangers. Where do we find the danger? How do we find it? How do we know where it is? And you know, we do something called a hazard analysis. And basically, if you take the picture on the left and you look at the work site there with all the activities going on, what I want to try to do is be able to identify where the danger exists. And we commonly look for hazards by looking for physical hazards. And one of the things that's pretty common to see around nowadays is this energy wheel. So if we look for where energy is being used, we can attach it to the danger thing and go, well, the uncontrolled release of hazardous energy, all right, if it strikes out and comes in contact with something it's not intended to be in contact with, we have injury, and we may even have death. And we look and we evaluate stuff, and we look at physical hazards all the time, and we dissect them. We do our hazard analysis, and something comes into the equation. What about the people? What about the people? We're looking at the environment and we're identifying the hazards. What about those people? Remember, I said hazards were unsafe conditions and unsafe actions. So when we start evaluating that or breaking it down a little bit more, we think, well, the people. When we're getting ready to do a project, basically what we do is we leverage three things: labor, material, and equipment. Our use of those things and our efficient, effective use of those things goes into the success or failure of a project. And if we look at those resources, I get it, money is one of them. We could look at that as a fourth resource, but let's look at the labor, the material, and the equipment. If I have a very expensive piece of equipment that I just purchased, maybe a front end loader or a big truck or something like that, I put a lot of energy, I put time and energy into taking care of it. We kind of follow some preventive maintenance programs to take care of it. The DOT requirement for a truck is that I do a pre-trip and a post-trip inspection. So before I operate that piece of equipment, I'm taking a look at it, making sure it's in good sound condition. After I operate it on the road for the day, I look at it again to make sure nothing went wrong. I'm constantly evaluating that equipment. I want to take care of it, and I want to make sure it's safe. If we've got materials, let's say there's going to be, we're predicting that, I'm a contractor and I need to get some ductile iron for underground pipe that I'm going to be using for water. And I hear, that the commodities market is predicting that, ductile iron, the price of it is going to go up in the next 6 months. And I know that I'm going to need it. But right now I bid a project at a certain price. And you know what? I think it might be better for me if I buy the products now and I store them at a facility, okay, so that I have them and I got them at the price that I had bid the project for. Okay, so I'm putting some time and energy into it because what I want to do is get a good return on investment at the end of the day. Now, what about our labor? When we look at the people that we have working for us, how do I look at them? They present some unique stuff because people are very dynamic. You can look at some of these things and it's very static, what dangers or maladies may impact the material or the equipment. But what about the people? And how do I start looking at this? Well, I like to ask this question: what skills do workers need to function normally and safely out on a job? And it was interesting because I pulled up something and I started looking at these three categories. All right. Physical skills. And what are those physical skills? Strength. We've got to have ability to do heavy lifting a lot of times if we're engaged in manual work activities. Endurance. How can I handle it if this is a strenuous job and working? I don't know if anybody's ever watched some boring cable shows like I do, or there's a show called Axemen that comes on, and it's these guys that are cutting down trees and they're loggers, if you will. and, you know, the stamina that it takes to do that job, which is a very dangerous job. They got a young guy who was in college, who came out to decided to, he was going to work a summer with these guys and try to do it. Oh my gosh, he was ready to go home after the first day. So part of what they do in having a physical skill is an endurance, an ability to endure a rigorous work activity. Okay, communication skills are part of that, that I need to be able to communicate back and forth to people. If you think about this, think about somebody that's signaling a crane. Okay, they have to know how to communicate with that crane. Of course, we use verbal signals, so we may be talking to them through a radio, and we want to have clear, concise communications. But if I'm using hand signals, I have to be familiar with the hand signals, and they have to be given in a way that the crane operator understands it, and we're communicating back and forth. So communication skills. How about the ground guide, guiding a vehicle when it's backing up or moving around? Okay, communication skills are part of the necessary function that somebody has to have when they come to work. Now, how about this cognitive skill, this problem solving? Something like critical thought goes into the equation of cognition. How I look at things, how I perceive things, how it noodles through my brain, and the thoughts and decisions I make whenever I'm doing a particular activity. These are like the necessary functions or skills that our people have to have when they come to work. Now, let me say something too. All of those skills, I keep looking at labor intensive work activities, people that are doing a lot of manual labor. You know, it could be in construction, it could be in general industry, could be in the maritime, you know, it could be in just moving of materials, logistical people, warehouses, things like that. But just for 1 second, don't let this cloud your mind up to think that people that are in management or sales or something like that don't necessarily have to have these skills as well. And you know, things that come into the equation with people as they're doing their job have the potential to cause a problem. What do we call those things? We you know, let's think about this. Let me share this with you. I pulled something up, and it was kind of like a description of how we would expect people to come to work. Each employee is required to report to work in an emotional, mental, and physical condition necessary to perform their job safely and unimpaired, which includes being free of the effects of alcohol, drugs, including prescription or over-the-counter medications that may impair cognitive and physical function. You know, when I start talking about impairment, you know, right away, a lot of our minds, I think it automatically shifts to drug testing programs. But let's say, are you ready to work? Are you ready to work? When we use that term impairment, maybe there's more to it than just drugs and alcohol. The National Safety Council helps us out. They've got a definition and an approach. Workplace impairment is the inability to function normally or safely as a result of a number of factors, from chemical substances such as alcohol, opioids, or cannabis, to physical factors like fatigue, as well as experiencing mental distress and social factors like stress. Whoa. You mean there's more to this equation than meets the eye? It's not just simply being impaired by drugs or alcohol. There are other things that can come into play. Let me read something for you. I pulled up something that was talking about fatigue. And it was talking about symptoms. Signs and symptoms are things that we're looking for when people are working, or when, if you go back to your first aid and CPR training, first aid, when you're evaluating a patient, you're looking for signs and symptoms. You're looking at things I can see, and then there's also things that are described to you that are helping you evaluate a patient to try to identify what their medical emergency is. Fatigue is generally not a lone symptom. It usually comes with other symptoms and can help your health. Here's where I'm going to. Some of the symptoms associated with fatigue are headache, dizziness, sore achy muscles, muscle weakness, slowed reflexes and response, impaired judgment and decision-making, moodiness, including irritability, impaired hand-eye coordination, the ability to do activities that require the use of both hands. So, holy cow, it's not just necessarily drugs or alcohol. I could be sleep deprived. And that could be a form of impairment that shows up in the workplace, causing me a problem. Let's look at something else here. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics recently came out with some information related to workplace fatalities in 2023. 2023, there were 5,283 fatalities in the workplace in the United States. And as you start looking, you see the common places where we see fatalities occur in the workplace. They show up as far as in terms of falls from elevation and transportation incidents, vehicle crashes and falls tend to be some of the top leading causes of fatalities in the workplace. Well, in the BLS data, in their summary of their data, look right here, opioids were the primary source of 162 fatalities and a contributor in an additional 144 fatalities where multiple drugs were the source. And let's think about this. When you think about high hazard industries, the industry that represented a lot of fatalities here was the construction industry. And in 2023, there were 1,073 fatalities in the construction industry. That was the one of the leaders on this thing. It was the highest represented category, all right, in this BLS statistics. And let's look at construction workers, and start dissecting it. I always like to dissect the frog. We're going to pick on construction folks a little bit here, but let's look at this thing. It's construction second in substance abuse disorders. The restaurants and bar industry is the one that is the leader, but construction is number 2. 22.6% of the people in the construction industry use pain relievers. Now, let me pause for a second because I want you to think about that. 22.6 of them use pain relievers. And musculoskeletal disorders are an issue that show up a lot. There was Liberty Mutual develops a workplace safety index, and it was talking about the leading causes of claims. Overexertion involving outside sources, handling of objects continues to rank among the leading causes of disabling injuries. This event category includes injuries related to lifting, pushing, pulling, holding, carrying, throwing objects. Overexertion cost businesses $12.84 billion in direct costs and accounts for 21.9% of the overall national burden of claims. And it's like, wow, check that out. Well, let's think about that. Overexertion, okay, heavy industry. We talked about some of the things that people need to have, the abilities, their endurance, okay, their heavy lifting, their dexterity, hand-eye coordination, lifting techniques, strong eyesight, good hearing. All of these things go into the equation that people need to have as a skill when they're doing these particular jobs. And it says 22.6% of the people use pain relievers. Okay. And if you look at the protocol that exists out there for dealing with pain, especially severe acute pain, one of the things that shows up in that protocol is the use of opioids as a medication. Okay, so some of these people who are in severe pain legitimately may be using opioids. Check out this next one. 60.3% of the workers in the construction industry use cannabis. Okay, and maybe some of those people are using cannabis to help them deal with some of the pain associated with their work activities. So it's a high number. Okay, another one is second in heavy drinking. It's a high stress business to be in. They have sleep disorders, mental health, and job stress. That comes from NIOSH, the CDC, National Safety Council, National Institutes of Drug Abuse. We start to look at these things that exist in the workplace. And I talked to you a little bit about the use of pain protocol or the pain protocol for acute strains and sprains or injuries. You know, the opioids show up. Check this out. Impairment from any cause is a fitness for duty concern. All right, the effects: reduced ability to concentrate and think clearly, decreased coordination and sensory perception, slower reaction time, other other psychological impacts, personality changes, mood changes or irritability, changes in workplace behaviors and performance. Those things come into the equation, and as things impair our ability to function, they impact our ability to function normally or safely in the work environment. So, wow. We looked at a lot of the physical hazards as far as recognizing, understanding, and controlling. Now we're looking at the human factor. Human beings out on the job, we want them to perform at their optimum level. Really and truly, the people that are coming to work for us are nothing short of athletes. All right, they're doing the same thing as somebody in an athletic competition would do. They're using their bodies to do physical work. Okay, they have to clearly think and act and function at a peak level, because that's what we want them to do. Really, what are we doing? Well, when we're doing our job, we're trying to prevent them from getting injured or killed. So there's some people have unique job requirements, and we identify those as safety sensitive positions. That is a special term that was coined by the Department of Transportation. And it's a term that says a job or position where the employee holding this position has the responsibility for his or her own safety or for the safety of others. Safety sensitive position means position subject to drug and alcohol testing because the nature of the employee's duties and responsibilities indicate a potential that impaired performance due to drugs or alcohol or both could result in injury or death to the employee or others. This term is used for commercial drivers. All right, and the Department of Transportation, it's a federally regulated activity, okay, through the Department of Transportation, and it prescribes that people engaged in safety sensitive functions are subject to drug and alcohol testing, okay? And one other place where we see that term show up, if you're in the state of Maryland, Maryland has a law that addresses cranes, rigging people, and signal people. Cranes, riggers, and signal people. That term, safety sensitive position, is specifically described in that law. So if you're engaged in the operation of a crane, if you're an apprentice crane operator or somebody that's in training, if you're rigging, all right, you're hooking stuff up to the crane, you're rigging materials that's going to be flown over a job site. If you're signaling a crane, providing the communications from to the crane operator, those are determined by law in the state of Maryland to be safety sensitive positions. Why am I bringing that up? Okay. The drugs that are evaluated for safety sensitive positions, the categories of drug, marijuana, cocaine, amphetamines, opioids, phencyclidine, which is our PCP. Those are the things that people are tested for because they are subject to testing if they are in a safety sensitive position. And what I want to say to you is marijuana is still on the Drug Enforcement Agency's Schedule 1 drug, which means, all right, meaning that it has no accepted medical use and has high potential for abuse. That's the way the federal government describes it. So people that are in safety sensitive positions that are regulated by law, that are required to participate in drug and alcohol screening, marijuana is still on the drug panel that they are tested for. Oh, now this is kind of an interesting thing because medical marijuana, all right, in Maryland, and I use Maryland as a reference, but I would say to you this is if you look around the United States, there's all kinds of different interpretations of how people identify marijuana and the use of it. Okay, in the state of Maryland, and I use Maryland because I think it's a good example. Okay, back in 2014, marijuana was legalized, medical marijuana, and it was legalized for the use for Maryland had determined that there was a medical value for the use of marijuana. All right, and the conditions included but are not limited to anorexia, chronic pain, glaucoma, seizures, muscle spasms, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other chronic medical conditions that are severe in nature and for which other treatments have been ineffective, leaving a fair amount of leeway. So, oh no, this creates a challenge to us, okay? Because marijuana, well, let me share some things with you. I spent a lot of years as a safety director, and one of my duties in that role as a safety director was I was in charge of the drug and alcohol program. I implemented that in my workplace, and I was probably pretty stubborn and hard-nosed as to how I thought about things. Okay, typically the way it was a condition of employment. You had to pass a drug test to come to work. Then we had reasonable suspicion testing. We had post-incident testing, return to work stuff. Basically, we had a similar protocol for drug and alcohol testing as the DOT prescribed. And one of my thoughts was that, you know what? Hey, if you have one of these drug categories, the marijuana, the cocaine, the amphetamines, the opioids, the phencyclidine, if any of that stuff's in your system, you're a hazard. You're a danger in the workplace. And you know, for the lack of a better way to say it, it was you had a protocol you had to follow, but it was you were removed from the workplace, okay, because you were a danger. And you know, marijuana was part of that. I was kind of stubborn about that, thought that it was an impairing substance. If there was a level of the antibody in your system that caused you to come up positive for the test, my thought was that this stuff is impairing you in the workplace and you know what, you're in danger and you need to go. I was pretty stubborn. Okay, and it was kind of interesting because people used to call me the Grim Reaper in some ways, because I terminated people who failed drug tests. And I was, like I said, I was set in my ways. I was pretty rigid in my interpretation of it. I was aware of the statistics, not only from the data sense, but from interacting with people on work sites, that you know, people are using marijuana, but it's a danger. Okay, and once again, if it's in your system, you know, you're positive on the drug test, bam, you're a problem. That's causing to, that's impairing your ability to function. Now, things have changed. Okay, and you know, even when they came up with this medical marijuana legalization, I was still pretty sketchy on it. And at the Chesapeake Region Safety Council, we started doing something, about 5 or 6 years ago. We started doing something called green workshops, which were a combination of three things. We wanted to learn about medical marijuana. We wanted to learn about its impact on people. And we thought the best place we could learn it from was from law enforcement, people that are evaluating people for impaired driving on a regular basis. So, and we wanted to learn from them as safety professionals, learn what they're doing, learn how they're evaluating people. So we started working with people that were called drug recognition experts. We were working with medical card holders, and then we were working with safety professionals, workplace safety professionals. And what we were trying to do is bring these people together and learn from each other. And it was really interesting, something that had a major change, in my opinion, about the effects of marijuana on somebody, was the very first time we did it. I was talking to one of the law enforcement officers who was a drug recognition expert trainer, and he had been teaching drug recognition experts for somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 years. And so I went up and I started talking to him. And I said, you know, I did this with these drug testing programs for a lot of years. And I said, you can't tell me if that stuff shows up in your system from a drug test that it's not impacting your ability to function or your behavior. And the drug recognition expert trainer looked at me and he said, you're wrong. And I thought, oh, check this out. This guy, who's a law enforcement guy, who does this all the time, I kind of expected that he probably might have the same opinion about this as me. And all of a sudden he's telling me, no, you're wrong. He said, just because that stuff's in your system does not mean it's impacting your behavior. It's not necessarily impairing you anymore. And, you know, the antibody for THC, the THC that shows up in your system, there's two kinds of it. There's one that's called hydroxy, and there's another one called carboxy. And the THC is fat soluble. And so the THC in marijuana stores in your fat cells. And the hydroxy THC is the one that impairs you. But your body kind of, that stuff is eliminated out of your system relatively quickly within, you know, a couple of hours at best of you using marijuana or cannabis. And the carboxy, which does not impair your function, is what's stored in your fat cells. So that, and when you do a urinalysis, it does not separate the two. The urinalysis typically trips off at, if you have 50 nanograms per milliliter in your urine, okay, it comes up positive, and then there's a confirmation test that's a little bit more accurate. If it goes over 15 nanograms per milliliter, okay, then that's reported as a positive drug test. It does not mean you are impaired. And it could be that I used marijuana a few days ago and it shows up in my system because it's stored in my fat cells. The other categories of drugs, the cocaine, the amphetamines, the opioids, the phencyclidine, those are not fat. The antibodies for those that pop the test positive are not stored in fat cells. They're eliminated out of your system in a relatively short period of time. So if you come up positive for one of those other ones, there's a strong possibility that you're impaired at the time. If you come up positive for marijuana or the THC in your system as a result of a urinalysis test, of which is the protocol for the DOT, and it's the common protocol that many people use, it does not mean that you're impaired. It just means that sometime in the recent past, and it could be up to 30 days, depending on the amount you used cannabis or marijuana, and it's in your system. All of a sudden, my old stubborn rear end, it gets hit in the face with something, and I have to come to terms with, wow, is this stuff really impairing people? And this is something I started learning as a result of these green workshops where I'm a safety guy. I'm not law enforcement. Okay. I am aware that people are using marijuana. Okay. So we had marijuana users or cannabis users. Okay. And law enforcement, we have all these people, and we brought this group of people together so we could learn from each other. And I want to show you something that after that law enforcement guy, the DRE trainer, hit me, something else happened. Here's one of our medical card holders that was working with us in our green workshop. And I want you to listen to what he's got to say.
In 2012, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. It's called Wegener's granulomatosis. And it almost killed me. And in order to save my life, they had to give me very large amounts of steroids, prednisone in particular, for a very long time. And there's a rare side effect with prednisone. Something about like 5 to 10% of people get very severe bone death. It's called avascular necrosis. So it's all over my body, but the worst are both my knees and ankles. There are spots maybe this big of just dead bone where the blood supply is done and doesn't grow back. And those spots swell and they push out on whatever is healthy, and they push on the joints, and it causes a ton of pain. So after that was diagnosed, they started me on an opiate regimen. I didn't love it. It messed with my sleep, my eating. I didn't feel myself. So very recently, within the past year, I got my card, and I've started using marijuana to supplement a large supply of my opiates and drop the fentanyl patch, especially, way down in dosages so that it's not this constant, drugging, basically. So on the fentanyl patch, which I still take, but they have me at 100 micrograms, or actually 150 micrograms leaving the hospital. And you just constantly feel in a fog because it's always releasing. It lasts, 72 hours, and then you're put a brand new one on. And the first night you put it on, you usually can't sleep. It makes you really itchy, wired. And it's pretty awful. It kills your appetite, all that stuff. And so I've been able to drop to just 25 from 150 on that patch, and that alleviates tons of side effects, all the negative side effects. My sleeping is better. I can eat a meal without feeling, instantly sick to my stomach. I can be way more clear when I need to be. It's not this constant that I can control. You know, if I'm smoking, but when I need to be, I can function at a much higher level outside of, you know, using. My message would be to have some, come at it from a compassionate angle and maybe kind of learn the stories behind it, because, you know, everybody will hear oxycodone or fentanyl or even marijuana and instantly, you know, flip to that negative connotation. But I didn't ask for any of this, and I didn't smoke when I got sick. I do now to take less of the more impairing drugs, and it's kind of making the best out of what you're dealt. And to speak to the safety side, like I said, I definitely feel that I'm able to function at a much more clear, higher level using marijuana as a supplement than constantly having opiates pushed into my bloodstream through that patch.
Wow, that had a big impact on me. Not only did I hear it from law enforcement, now I'm listening to somebody who's using this in a medical way to help them. And if you look, if you go back to the beginning and we started talking about the accident prevention process,
2012.
you know, it was recognize a hazard, understand it, and control the hazard. And if you look at that systematic approach, safety people recognize there's a hierarchy of controls when we're dealing with hazards in the workplace. And one of the things that shows up at the top of that hierarchy of controls is something called substitution. Okay, and if we can use something that's less dangerous to do the job as effectively as something else, then we substitute it out, or we eliminate, or we substitute. That's part of that hierarchy of controls that we use. And here's a guy who's saying he is using cannabis to reduce his use of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid. Whenever I showed you the first couple slides, we were talking about the unintentional injury deaths in the United States. And at the top of that list was poisoning and overdoses. And it was 99,500 and something. Almost 100,000 people in the United States die from poisonings or overdoses. 77,000 of those fatalities are a result of opioids. Something else I want to share with you that came up, you know, and I looked at it when we looked at that BLS statistic stuff. It says opioids were the primary source of 162 fatalities and a contributor to another 144 fatalities where multiple drugs were the source. So there's an impact that this opioid has on life and death. And if we could substitute something else out for it, then maybe that's a good idea. If you remember when I was talking about the Liberty Mutual data, they were talking about one of the leading musculoskeletal disorders were a leading problem for workplace claims. Okay, and in the medically consulted injuries, there were 63 million medically consulted injuries in the United States. The pain protocol for musculoskeletal disorders or pain management for acute pain, a lot of times includes the use of opioids. The other part of that is you know, how many people go to the doctors, you know, as soon as something hurts? Some people in industry, you know, as they get older, our aging workforce, hey, that's just part of the, you know, that's part of what I do. You know, I work hard every day. There's pain associated with it. Anybody's been in athletic competition before, especially in a contact sport, after you get through with your game, participating at a high level, there's aches and pains and soreness. Do we always go to the doctor for it? No. A lot of times people kind of self-treat themselves. So what do? Hey, maybe we throw down a couple ibuprofen, a couple of leaves, something like that. Well, maybe people are using cannabis to address those soft tissue injuries, those pains. The other thing that they may be using it for is to help them relax. If they have sleep disorders, that was a significant problem in the construction industry. It relaxes them. There are things that cannabis may be doing for people that all of a sudden you go, hey, is it that bad? Well, you know what? If we're using it and we're impaired by it, you can look right here on my slide. Cannabis impairment, it messes with depth perception, it messes with reaction time, it messes with coordination, it impacts our motor skills and sensory distortion. All of those things, if you roll back, those were skills we needed in order to be able to function in the workplace. So when I come to work, I want them to be at a high level of performance. This could potentially be a problem. All right. But, and here's what the but is. There's a difference between being impaired and having it in your system. Okay. And case in point, a lot of folks are going to go home after work today and have a couple drinks, and maybe even, get a little lightheaded. All right. But are you going to test them for that on Monday and terminate their employment because they had a couple drinks on Friday if they did it safely and all that great stuff? So all of a sudden this causes a thought process and a transition and maybe a different interpretation of the use of cannabis. What I'm going to tell you is it does not matter how you feel about it or what state law says about it, whether it's medical use cannabis or it's recreational use of cannabis. If you are a commercial driver and subject to DOT, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Association, if you're required to take that drug test, it doesn't matter whether you used it for medical purposes or recreational purposes, and what state you used it in does not matter. If you have a commercial license and you're subject to it and it comes up as a result of a urinalysis at the level I shared, 50 nanograms per milliliter to 15 nanograms per milliliter, it doesn't matter. You failed the test, regardless of what the state law says. So, something I want to share with you. All right, looking at some of the solutions, looking at some of the things you can do. I'm going to tell you as a safety professional, I like to determine it or identify it as something called management by walking around. Walking around, interacting with your workers, your employees, talking to them, getting a sense of how they feel, all right, what's up with them, whether it's, as a result of anything. You want to just talk to them. How you doing today? What's up? What's going on with your family? How's things going? And when you do, there's a protocol for reasonable suspicion. And it's this: you observe, you confirm, you document, you confront, and you test. Not necessarily in that order, but when I'm walking around, I'm looking for things that are out of place, somebody that's not acting normal. Okay. And if I see something like that, I want to draw that person away from that environment. And I want to look at them a little bit more scrutinizing. I want to get a little bit more in-depth look at them. Okay. I want to document what I see. And then there may be a confrontation. If I have a drug and alcohol testing program, I want to talk to them and kind of evaluate them and see what they say, and then send them off for testing. This is the system that is pretty commonly used for drug and alcohol testing when I see somebody who appears to be impaired in the workplace. Observe, confirm, document, confront, and test. And what am I doing? The signs and symptoms I'm looking for: appearance, behavior, speech, and odors. Okay, those are things that I'm looking for whenever I'm talking to somebody. Once again, here's what I want to share with you too. As safety people, we're not making a determination, hey, you're under the influence of this, that, or the other. What I'm doing is looking at somebody and saying they're functioning out of their normal realm. They're out of the ordinary. They need to have certain skills that are at a peak level, especially when they're functioning in a high hazard industry. And as I go around and I'm interacting with people, I'm, hey, these things are clues. They're tripping my brain to say, hey, there's a potential hazard here, and I need to look for appearance, behavior, speech, and odors. Those are clues that I get. And if I determine, hey, there's a problem here, okay, I want to evaluate them. All right. And let me go back where I go through this protocol: observe, confirm, document, confront, and test. All right. Appearance, behavior, speech, and odors are things that I'm looking for. And if I send them for testing, this is the thing I'm concerned about right here.
Let's see right here. Okay. Okay. You want to take your driver's license out of your wallet? Stand up here. You stand over here. Place your hands on the tape. On here. Whoa, 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 whoa. You're gonna have to quit doing this, No. No.
We want to make sure our people that come to work are not in the condition that this gentleman is, especially if they're engaged in things that are high hazard work activities. There are tools that exist out there, and we've been working with some that exist. One of them is called a Druid. It's an app you can put on your phone, and it's not telling whether you're drunk or stoned or something like that. What it is it's a tool that evaluates yourself against yourself. You have a baseline score, and then you're evaluating yourself every day when you come to work through the series of this very short test. Okay, and it's going to tell you within a certain range, are you out of your normal range? It's a tool that people can use. If somebody has this on their phone, they do the Druid app test. Okay, and all of a sudden a safety director or somebody in supervision gets a flag that, hey, I've got 200 guys out here working, but I've got 3 of them that I might want to go talk to and see how they're doing today because they scored out of their normal range. That's what this Druid app is. There's a gaze thing. One of the things that law enforcement does is a standard field sobriety test. Okay, there's a walk and turn test. There's a one-leg balance, and then there's something called horizontal gaze nystagmus. And that's where you see them working a pen or something back and forth in front of somebody's eyes. There's something that impacts the fluid in your ears when you're using alcohol and sometimes drugs that will cause your eyes to twitch or fluctuate when they get to a certain level based on the impairing substance. Alcohol is pretty commonly done. Okay, there is a convergence thing that is done to identify potentially the use of cannabis and the ways your eyes will twitch. But this is a tool that exists out there, this gaze device that you can put on people and do an evaluation. It's not telling you that they're drunk or high, but it's telling you that there's potential impairment and they may be a safety issue. There's one more thing that exists out there that's called an intoximeter. All right, which you can do a swab test of somebody, stick it in their mouth and stick it in this machine, and it will do an evaluation. The difference between a urinalysis and a swab test, the swab test tells recent use, especially of cannabis. So if they have used cannabis recently, it's going to come up. Is this telling you that they're impaired? No. But if you combine that with appearance, behavior, odor, speech, things are out of the ordinary, maybe this is one of those things that flags somebody and says, I want to get them out of that position where they're in danger of getting injured and put them doing something else till I get further evaluation. So listen, these are 3 of the things that exist out there. We've used them and we've had them demonstrated to us when we're doing our green workshops. They have some promise. There are tools. They're not the 100% answer. What I need to do within my organization is my company policy is going to address how I deal with ready for work status, things that impair me in the workplace. I have a policy. I need to write a policy, outline what my company does for people and with people in the event that they appear out of normal. Okay. They have a ready for work status that they have to adhere to when they come to work. We want them to be healthy and safe. And this is our policy says this. Leadership. People have to walk the walk. Okay. And people in an organization have to lead people and share with them that, we have a certain set of values that we follow in this organization, that you're alert, aware, you're ready to go to work when you come here each and every day. I think I read that a few minutes ago. Where was it? Here it is right here. Each employee is required to report to work in an emotional, mental, physical condition necessary to perform their job safely and unimpaired. Okay, this is what I want people to, how I want people to behave. And me as a leader, I'm going to show up that way too. There may be a process that I follow or how to deal with somebody if I identify a concern with impairment in the workplace. I also want to educate them, okay, and let them know that these things impact them in a certain way, all right? Maybe you don't even have marijuana on your drug testing panel, but something you need to let people know that if you're using it before you come to work, it has the potential to impair how you operate, and that could be a problem. It's no different than getting a prescription from a doctor. It could even be, somebody uses a certain amount of NyQuil or Dayquil, it can impact their ability to function during the day. So I want to educate them on what the impact of drugs and alcohol or impairing substances are. And I also want to educate them about diet, exercise, taking care of themselves, staying hydrated. All of those things have an impact on on their ability to function at work. And then, employee assistance programs show up in the form of support. If you typically you got medical insurance, most medical insurance programs have employee assistance programs. I would have some tools available to help support people. Once again, this is not only just drugs and alcohol. It could be a mental condition. It could be stress. It could be some psychological thing that's impacting somebody, and I want to support them. There's a limited amount of people available to do certain jobs efficiently and effectively. And if I have a good employee who just is struggling with a little bit of a problem, I might want to support them and help them through their problems so they can continue to be a healthy, safe, productive person. Now, I got one more thing for you. All right. And what I want to do is challenge each and every person here with something. If you had the ability right now to do one thing today that had the potential to save a life or prevent an injury, would you do it? I mean, right now, I can pretty nearly guarantee that if you did this and you followed it, you would likely prevent somebody from getting injured or possibly even killed. Our work zones, highway work zones, are a potential problem. When we think about it, it relates to driving on the road, impairment. Typically, why do we have crashes, fatal crashes? Speed, distraction, and impairment are the three primary categories as to why we have fatal crashes. Right near our office here in March of 2023, we had a terrible work zone crash that caused 6 people to lose their lives. And what we have started here at the Safety Council is something called a work zone safety pledge. And what I'd like you all to do real quickly is take your phone out, focus in on that QR code that's on the screen, and it'll take you to something called our work zone safety pledge page. And what it is asking you to commit to this work zone safety pledge. It says when you come up on a work zone, all right, I will do 3 things. I will slow down, I will move over, and I will pay attention. And it's asking you to commit to that pledge and submit your email address and check off that I did it, your name and email. We're not going to mail you anything. This is nothing. This is just to get legitimate commitment, get people to put some skin in the game so that we're driving through a work zone. We slow down, we move over, we pay attention. And by doing so, you are going to reduce the likelihood of a work zone crash and causing somebody injury or death in the workplace. So, without further ado, if anybody has a question real quick, you could submit it into the chat. I think there are some. I don't know, Debbie, if you or Kim, if you're here and you want to take a look at them and let me know what they are, I will do my best to give them a good answer.
Yep, there are a couple questions, Dave. Christy's answered a few along the way, but we have a couple more, don't we, Christy?
We do. Dave, going back to your slide about prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs, somebody asked, does the 22.6% that use pain relievers include over-the-counter drugs, or is it only prescription drugs?
Yes, it could be over-the-counter drugs that exist in there. Now, sometimes when they're using pain relievers, it more than likely, most of them, the majority of them in that particular situation, even if it's over the counter, it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't have an impairing impact on you. And that's where it's important for you to consult the labels on medications when you're using it. A lot of times people too will you could get ibuprofen, okay, and take it at a level that it potentially could impair you because you take it at a prescription level. So I would thoroughly consult the labels on any medication that you use, whether it's over the counter or prescription medication, because there is the potential. I can go to the store and buy cold medication that has the potential to impair my function. So I need to know about that and read the label thoroughly. And it should be something that you address in your education and your company policy. Hope that's
Yeah,
a good.
and Dave, I'll say a lot of like those kind of over-the-counter drugs are now, you still have to buy at the pharmacy. You still have to go to the pharmacy to buy, even though it's considered over-the-counter. But we have another question, Dave. It was regarding the safety sensitive positions. And they basically want to know, isn't everything considered a safety sensitive position in construction? You have your traffic flagger to the labor apprentice cleaning up trash on site when there's heavy equipment in the area. Basically, what wouldn't be considered a safety sensitive position?
It's an excellent question. Okay. And when I say safety sensitive position, and I explained it the way I did, talking about the drug testing, the safety sensitive position is a regulatory term that exists, okay, in DOT language, all right, to describe, you know, what type of drug testing these people are subject to. Is everything out in construction a safety sensitive position? Yes, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Does it make it a position that requires you to test for the same drugs that you would for a DOT test? No. And a lot of employers that exist out there now, because of the prevalence of the use of cannabis, they have completely removed cannabis from their panel of drugs that they test for. So some people, and it's the difference between whether you have to do it as a result of a regulatory compliance requirement like the DOT, or it's your in-house drug testing program to try to keep your employees as safe as you possibly can. Two different animals, two separate interpretations. Yes, I would say based on the definition, you can consider almost anything in a high hazard industry a safety sensitive position. It does not mean that it falls under the DOT requirement. One other thing is that each state has different laws as it relates to the use of cannabis. And as a result of a positive drug test for cannabis, what you can test for and how you can deal with people. Okay, so I hope that answers that question.
Yes, thanks, Dave. The next couple questions, I think Debbie might be able to answer when she goes to speak about her couple things. So I'll just mention them in case, Debbie, you can kind of, weave it into what you're about to say. But they are talking about any programs that we offer for trials of the tech solutions that were mentioned. And then about convincing the company to use a swab instead of using the P-test. So Debbie, I'll let you start talking about your things, and maybe you could answer some of those questions.
Yep, beautiful.
Definitely. So I'm going to start sharing. Let me know if you can see what I've got up.
No, not yet, Debbie. Let me double check your role here. Okay, let's give that a try.
Now?
Don't see it just yet.
I'm trying to stop sharing mine and I'm having a little bit of a problem with it. So give me a second here.
And go back into Zoom and make sure that.
I am not getting an opportunity to stop sharing.
Yeah, yours should be
telling me
down.
that I cannot share.
All right, let's see.
You know what? I'm going to close out and you guys will still be able to share. I'm going to back out and then I'll come back on in a second.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, and if for some reason my screen does not work, I can certainly just talk through it.
Oh,
Looks
there's
like
Debbie.
it's coming up.
Yeah,
There it
there you
goes.
go.
Got it?
Yep.
Okay. So change presentation.
Beautiful. It's
There we
coming
go.
down.
All right, so as Dave mentioned, there are technology resources that we have brought into our cannabis use workshops. He mentioned green labs or green workshops. On our site and in our discussions, we usually call them impairment education and cannabis use workshop programs. And when we bring in our tech resources, we've been very, very fortunate in our partners. On your screen, you're going to see 3 mentioned. They've been our most consistent attendees. The first one Dave mentioned as the Druid app. It's actually owned by a company called Impairment Science. You can actually right now load that app onto your phone and see how it works. We are partnering with them and offering a 8-week program for companies that want to view this as a potential resource, costs nothing. And we already have one Baltimore area company that's in the middle of the pilot program. The next one is GAZE. It's an ocular testing program. Dave had that slide up with the visual of somebody doing the ocular testing program. And it mimics a lot of what you see during a sobriety test by law enforcement as far as the test the individual would participate in. And then Dave mentioned intoximeters. Intoximeters comes in and they do oral fluid testing that would be relevant to the law enforcement side. And then on the employer side, we have had Abbott come in. They use the same products, and we've been fortunate in having both of them and having their representatives on site during our impairment use workshops. If you're interested in participating in the pilot project that I mentioned, my name is in the chat. My contact information is available, and we can certainly discuss that with you. And as I mentioned, it's 8 weeks free, and Chesapeake is not seeing an individual's private scores during that program. The next thing I wanted to cover very quickly was the actual impairment education program that we do. It's 5 hours of classroom on drugs and alcohol, a few hours on cannabis in person with meet and greet with cannabis consumers. We've got some very consistent, well-educated consumers that will discuss why they use their best method of consumption for what they're trying to address, how long those effects last, and whether they consider themselves able to work and drive after that consumption event takes place. Dave mentioned that there were law enforcement, including their trainers, which we call drug recognition experts, our technology partners, and workplace safety, and other individuals that have some buy-in to safety on the roads or safety in the workplace. And we've been fortunate to receive some grant funding from some of our federal partners, including responsibility.org. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Christy. I think you wanted to talk very quickly about some of the other options, including the certificate program.
I did, yes. So we have our certificate program, where the whole worker health certificate program. And so I don't know if I can share my screen, but I think Kim put it in the, let's see if I can. Oh, I can. How about that? All right. So hopefully you can see that. And this is our certificate program, the whole worker health. Everybody see that?
No,
No?
not yet. I'll try to give you sharing back, but I did just list it in the chat.
Oh, okay, perfect. There we go.
Yeah, it just takes a
I
minute.
got it now. Yeah. Okay, so in that, this is all the different courses that are part of that whole worker health program. Debbie just mentioned the impairment education class, and the reasonable suspicion class was mentioned earlier. Those two are part of that. And then we have our mental health first aid class with that we are partnered with the state of Maryland to deliver. And we'll be doing that in February and in May. And then we have our Ready to Work, Whole Worker Health Ready to Work class, which actually, if you liked what you heard today, it really expands on that and talks about more of the impairing factors regarding stress and heat illness. So it'll actually touch on the heat illness standard in Maryland and some other impairing factors that you would see potentially in the workplace. That is coming up at the end of February as well. And then POSH is our go-to class, where if you're looking at safety culture, we if you've taken any of our other certificate program courses, POSH is always one of the required classes that we ask you to take, and that's Principles of Occupational Safety and Health. It's a National Safety Council course. And we have it coming up in February, but if you're interested in taking a road trip, it's also in Ocean City, Maryland, where you can go and take it there as well. So definitely look into that course. Even if you're not taking a certificate program, that's a really great course as well. And all of these are individually are great courses. You don't need to earn the certificate program or certificate here, but we strongly recommend it because it's a really it's a really good opportunity to start looking at that side of our workplace safety. All right, I think that was all I wanted to share with that.
So we did get a quick question in reference to being able to refer their person's company to use of different technologies for impairment testing. And that can be discussed if somebody wants to attend the free impairment education course, because we do have those technology partners on site. And we will have somebody from the oral fluid swab testing at the class that occurs on February 24th. And Kim put the registration for that in the chat. So I know that there's one individual that was very specific about that. And I think we pretty much covered all of the other questions. There is one in reference to a doctor documentation. And I'm not able to answer that other than I think that would just be a matter of your HR policy or something internal to your organization.
And like Kim said, this will be up on our website. You'll be able to get the access to the PowerPoint and the recording. Sometime next week, we'll be able to get it back up there for you. And actually, what we've been trying to do is, as the questions that have been asked, we'll put the answers to it as well, like a documentation with that as well, so that if you forgot what the answer was, or if anybody else, was interested in that question and the answer, we'll have that up as well. Anything else, Kim?
Nope, I think that pretty much covers it. There's a couple internal questions. We'll get back with you all if anything else comes through. And last thing I'll do is just put our contact information one more time in the chat in case you have a question later. Dave, thanks for a great presentation today.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. And you know what? You can consider the Chesapeake Region Safety Council a warm ray of sunshine on this cold day. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.